everyone. You're very welcome to our last press conference of the day with David Kiron, Editorial Director of MIT Sloan Review, and François Candelon, Managing Director and Senior Partner at Boston Consulting Group. So I'll now hand it over.
Good. So I don't know how you want to proceed. Maybe we give you a brief overview of the work we've done together. And the first thing which is great is that thanks to the Web Summit, for the first time I meet David in person while we've been working together since January 2020 on two reports. So maybe in 2 minutes, the purpose of this document is this report, which is based on on the survey of more than 2,000 executives and let's say interviews of 19 deep interviews in companies, is really trying to explain the relationship, how AI can impact the culture of companies. And the virtuous circle that we've been experiencing, where we see that when AI is deployed, it improves the effectiveness of teams, better decision quality, better efficiency. And as it improves the effectiveness, companies, let's say team members are more confident, are happier, it changes the culture, more collaboration between departments, they learn more clarity of roles, collective learning, and as I said, happier. And as they trust then AI better, then they are in a position to really open to new use cases and start the virtuous cycle once more. So I think this is but it doesn't stop at the team level. It is as well at the company level, and 63% of our respondents claim that they feel that thanks to AI, they are better positioned to defend their core business and to attack adjacencies. I don't know if you want to add.
The only thing I would add to that is, I mean, one of the exciting things about this research is that the culture discussion around AI oftentimes stops at, like, what do you need to do culturally to get your organization to accept and adopt AI? What we found is that that's like only half of the story. There's a whole other story, as François was explaining, that comes after you've developed effective AI. And all the cultural benefits that we talk about during this period of time and also in the report, it's a function of the AI has to work. So that's a precondition of a lot of the cultural benefits that we talk about. So it's not, you need culture change to adopt AI, and you get culture change after having adopted AI.
And by doing this, it has impact as well, I would say, potentially. And we had a strong argument on that because on the relationship between these cultural changes and the financial impact. At least they are related, but my vision, and I'm more a consultant on that front, is to say that I believe that you need first to change your culture, and that financial impact is actually a kind of a byproduct. So I think, and as you said, and the more you are, and we see that the more mature you are with AI, the stronger you are.
Yeah, we did have some discussions around that. I mean, there's a whole literature on organizational culture, and there's a strong strain within that literature that says it's extremely complicated and difficult to make the case that culture has an effect on organizational effectiveness. And financial impact is one of the things that we find associated with the cultural benefits that we've seen. And the way we've written the report is kind of a compromise between our positions.
I don't know, maybe we stop to see whether you have questions, otherwise we can talk for an hour for sure.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question?
Yeah. What's the definition of AI in this case?
So AI for us is, let's say, is based on 3 foundational capabilities, which are the ability to process big data in real time, to be able to achieve, let's say, ultra granularity, and then to be able to scale at almost zero marginal cost. So and that based on that, you will have a retroaction feedback loop that will help us improve your algorithm. So you have algorithm that based on big data will come to recommendations, and then based on the feedback we'll be able to improve the algo and improve the quality of the recommendation or the decision that is made.
Why do you ask? Sorry, I'm from the journalism world, so I have to I'm curious sort of why you asked that question.
Because AI is such a wide thing, and for this typical research, what were your limitations of the definition of AI? I mean, any company will claim that it uses AI, but not every company does.
That's true, but here we were very specific on whether they were using AI the way I described it. And what we found is that 58% of these companies were actually able to move to effectiveness. I think that through better decision quality, I think that what makes the real difference between both is whether you are putting AI more to the center of your company and trying to solve real issues compared to some company that will use AI but more on the side, trying to say, okay, it's nice, I need to do some machine learning, but I don't care that much about it. I think this is what makes the difference, and if you want to get really to get these cultural benefits, you need to achieve this level of effectiveness that requires to solve real issues and real business problems with AI.
One question. What is the role of the manager if we have algorithms that can tell us what is the path for our company? Right now we have I think a bunch of companies have a data-driven methodology that managers can work with, but with this assessment, what is the role of the manager? We can fire the manager.
All right, I have sort of a quick response. No, you need to promote the manager. So one of the things, there's a lot of talk about the impact of employee engagement on profitability. You get more engaged employees, and you're going to get happier people interacting with your customers. They're going to be happier at their jobs. They're going to be more productive. What we're finding with the cultural benefits of AI in the enterprise in this report, it shows that if you've got effective AI, and we define that in terms of it delivers improvements to decision quality and to efficiency in your organization or at the team level, you get a variety of benefits. More collaboration, more morale, greater clarity of role, and you have more collective learning that happens. These are key ingredients in what you might want from more engaged employees. So if you've got some enterprise or you're making large investments in trying to identify, build employee engagement, getting AI into your organization is one of the ways that can happen. And so that's just, I wasn't trying to be systematic in my answer to your question, but that's just one example which I hope is kind of gives you a sense of the kind of impact it can have.
Yeah, and what I would like to add to that is very often people look at AI as if companies would be fully automatized or autonomized, meaning that you only need a CEO in your company. Maybe in some cases, but in some others, we all know that AI is much better at dealing with, let's say, big data. At the same time, humans are much better at dealing with ambiguity, for instance. And I think that this is human plus AI. It's not AI replacing humans everywhere. It's human plus AI, and the combination of both is much better. For instance, we had an example at Pernod Ricard that is in the report, where they developed a tool to support the let's say, to help Salesforce to visit the stores and to choose the store they need to visit. And they were thinking that there might be some backlash, but no. The salespeople embraced this technology because they had the feeling that it was augmenting and not replacing their knowledge. So I think that AI is seen positively by the teams because on some side it can augment them, their choice, it gives them new ways of thinking about their role, new ways of thinking about what they need to do, they are augmented. On the other side, they can automatize some part of some tasks, so the non-value-add tasks are removed from the plates of the people. So it creates, as you said, more value-add potentially. And therefore, as you said, the managers should get promoted.
And so one more follow-up to that, because I think it kind of lands on one of the key issues that this report can help people grapple with more effectively. And that is, there is right now going on in a very popular language, like the Great Resignation. There's also, lesser known, but also happening, the Great Unbundling, where jobs are getting broken down into different tasks. And there's a lot of focus on what automation is doing to jobs, but if jobs are getting unbundled into various tasks, the question isn't about whether or not you're going to see job reduction. In some respects, job reductions are already happening because the nature of work is changing. There's huge increases in the amount of contingent labor that's being used to get work accomplished in the enterprise. Right now, sorry, I wasn't going to say this, but I'm working on a book for MIT Press focused on workforce ecosystems. And the kind of help that AI can give to organizations in identifying and securing contingent labor to help their organization is a huge deal. Again, you promote the manager who can use AI effectively to identify and recruit, hire, promote, labor.
Hello. I came a little bit late, so I don't know if someone asked already about this, but one of the big questions about AI is trust. And you mentioned that mistrust can be an option undermined. What I would like to know is that if you have seen differences in Europe and other parts of the world about trust in artificial intelligence, and if the legal framework and also the policies that are being put in place in Europe can help in this area.
That's right.
Did you pay?
No. I promise I didn't pay. I didn't pay you because it's one of my let's say words. So first of all, yes, there are massive difference and massive cultural differences in AI and in the questions we ask on AI. You have basically three different areas. You have Europe that always tries to. This is a Brussels effect to regulate before things happen. You have the US, and where they sometimes regulate after, and you have China, where they think about, where they really look at what happens, and then they regulate. But the difference, very often the cultural difference, I like two things. First of all is on the role of AI and the value of AI, the risk return you can have on some of them. And I give you one example on privacy for health data. What you see in Europe, we say, okay, it's unbearable to give your personal data yeah, that's true. But I spent the last 7 years in China. And there, when you go to Western China, where there is no physician, there are lack of doctors. Basically, AI is seen as a great opportunity to give access to a certain level of quality of care to this population. And therefore, the risk return is seen differently. So I'm not saying that there is one which is better than the other, but there are different ways. I think that regarding the European framework, I don't know if it will be. There are interesting things, but I fear that Europe believes that this is a lighthouse of the world, and I can say that say this as a French. Not saying that France is a lighthouse of the world, but because here we are facing an issue with this, which is the fact that it prevents very often European companies to be at the same level of competitiveness as the others. And the issue we face is the fact that we are with AI in a Schumpeterian creative destruction cycle, and many jobs will get destroyed, replaced by others. But it has been the case for, let's say, 1 century with any technology, and especially 2 centuries with the technologies. But it doesn't mean that the jobs that will get destroyed will be replaced in the same place. And I fear that Europe is missing this element of the equation.
So I'm having a follow-up question regarding the risks of AI, especially talking about the topic biased AI, because that's something that cannot be unforeseen or like foreseen. How can companies or countries manage those risks?
You want to take it or I take it? No, it's, as you say, there are things which are difficult to foresee. And this is why AI, what we should have in mind is that AI is just a technology. AI is not responsible or not responsible. AI is a technology. What is important is the way AI is developed and used. And this is where it's very important to have companies to think about their values, their ethics, and so on. And this is what will make it work or not. So I believe much more, and I'm not saying that it can only be self-regulation, but it needs to be a dialogue between companies and governments or regulators to make it work well. Because it's impossible in Brussels or in Washington or in Beijing to think about all what could happen. So you need to embark everyone to have, let's say, to create a better world, because AI can solve many of our current issues. It will create different ones, but it can solve many of our current issues.
All right, I'll add something. I mean, really, what is the bias question, really? Is it...
In Austria, which the Austrian governmental hand, which is responsible for helping people finding jobs, has been trying to implement AI. And they tried that with data from the last 13 years, and they found out the algorithm they made is completely racist and is favoring men. So they just throw the invention basically away, the algorithm.
So let me.
It took them many time to find out that the algorithm is biased. So the point is, it wasn't foreseen before. They didn't know after the implementation, and they only found out after a specific time. And I think, like, setting up AI for financial institutions or health institutions is going to include some risks that are sometimes, to my knowledge, unforeseen. And I just would like to know how to manage those risks, because it's got to be a calculated thing, right?
I think one thing to think about is the world that has existed prior to AI is incredibly biased. True. Structurally, systematically, interpersonally, all of it. For me, the question is AI going to make it worse? Is it going to reflect those biases? Can you establish governance processes to eliminate it? There are lots of different ways you can be careful about managing risk. I think the question is, once you manage those risks, do you have a better world? That's just, you have sort of a betterness layer on top of like the crap that's evolved through history, or are we really looking to AI once we've eliminated some of the biases, the very clear biases that you've just described in the countries you just described? Like, and it's actually going to help some of those systematic things that have existed for years and years and years.
Yeah, but I think that it's an important question that you're asking, because this is one of the things that are made in front of AI. But as I said, AI is a technology. It's a reflect of the world, but it can help solve that. You can see many AI algorithms today pushing for more inclusivity and being able to identify these biases. And this is why we need to be clear on that. In companies, we need, and this is why we push to have, let's say, ethic boards where you have ethic people deep in ethic with decision makers, financial decision makers, taking decisions together with the two lenses. But I believe to a certain extent that AI is a way and is an opportunity to self-reflect on our companies, on our biases, on our world. And this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, like mortgages. You know, in the US, black people get screwed on getting mortgages. And they have for years and years and years. You create AI. You perpetuate that. What a surprise. I mean, it's not a surprise. So the question, it's like, how do you correct for human bias in the past? And it's not an easy thing. One other thing I felt like I needed to tell you is that the whole thing about AI is just a technology. Sometimes AI, we're creating situations now where AI can be your boss. Mm-hmm. So it's like technology plus.
It's a technology plus. I agree with that.
Great. We have time for one more question.
You said you've interviewed hundreds of companies who really proved using AI. Do you see leading regions on the one hand side and leading industries on the other side? Or industries or regions lacking behind using AI? And if yes, what are they?
So maybe if I use, Michael Porter wrote in an article in 1990 that the competitiveness of a nation is the capacity of its industry to innovate and upgrade. And if we try to apply that to AI, and it's extremely important because as you have this feedback loop, the more you adopt, the more you create data, and therefore the more you can innovate. I think it's really important. And here what we see is basically three. You have the US leading in innovation, China leading in adoption. Europe, if it were existing, would be a distant but decent number 3, but Europe doesn't exist. And therefore, all the other countries are really lagging behind. And what we see as well is different ways to move into this. So in the US, very often what we've analyzed is the fact that traditional companies don't adopt AI that much, but they are overcome by, let's say, AI native companies. In Europe, we don't have tech giants, so we try to build it in-house with more or less success. Less than more. And in China, what they do is they try to align government, tech giants, and traditional companies to try. Let's say the government created an environment that makes it interesting and attractive for tech companies to embark traditional companies. And therefore, you can see that the level of adoption of AI by traditional companies is significantly higher in China than it is in other countries, which is, I would say, a great advantage in the long run. And in terms of industries, I would say that it's more a question of companies than industries. We mentioned KLM in the airlines, and there are not that many airline companies that are really using AI as much as they do. And basically, AI software is becoming a business for KLM. They sell AI softwares to other airline companies, for instance. So I think it's more the ability of a company to transform itself.
Yeah, which most of the industries that we've looked at, we find leading companies trying to do something innovative and powerful with AI. So it's like the question about industry kind of boils down to, are there a lot of companies in this? Like there's one way of looking at that question where are there a lot of companies in certain industries where it's more companies doing it than in other industries? And there's another way of asking it is like, are there some industries where there are some companies that are just so far ahead that, you know, it's like other industries like can't match it. So there's, what's the way of talking about it? It's like quantity versus like quality in a way. And those are two dimensions that you can answer the industry question on. But wherever we've looked, we found companies doing interesting things in a given industry.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much, David.
But for those who have additional questions, we can see each other just nearby.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.